All right, all right, all right. I'm here with Todd Kuslikis. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty darn close. That's good, Greg.
Kuslikis.
Yeah.
Very cool. You are from A Shot of Adrenaline. Tell me a little bit about what A Shot of Adrenaline. Tell me a little bit about your site and what you do and how you got started in fitness.
Yeah, a shot of adrenaline.net is the site that I run, and it's primarily focused on body weight training. And that's one of my passions. It's been a passion for probably about 10 years. I kind of started in the martial art field, and I started in a different perspective than most people start. I actually started on the Eastern traditional Chinese martial arts. And before I got into the Western Thai boxing and kickboxing and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I started off in Tai Chi and Bagua and Xingyi. So I learned kind of from the inner, like the internal, outward into the external. And that kind of started my passion for body weight training. And my martial art instructor that was teaching me all these internal martial arts also was super passionate about body weight training and functional training. Because you can build big muscles, but as you know, if you don't have this functional whole body strength, then in any fight that you get in, you're not going to be able to handle your opponent. I mean, the conditioning of the muscles and conditioning of the cardiovascular system and just your whole body needs to be working as a functional whole. So I started in this martial art training and kind of just naturally was inclined to move towards this bodyweight training space. And I still have very specific distinct memories of my martial art instructor. And he was over 50, but you'd watch him move. And you could watch him move, and he was absolutely as agile and as flexible, but yet he carried himself with just like this intense energy. I remember specifically watching him walk in the hall, and I thought I was watching a deer walk through the hall. Like, he had just incredible agility. I thought, what is he doing differently? And as I dove deeper into his training mechanisms and his training protocols, he didn't do a lot of heavy lifting. And I know there's always a place for heavy lifting, especially depending on what your goals are, but he did a lot of body weight training, and it wasn't just how many push-ups can I do, how many body weight squats you can do. It was very flowing. It was very difficult in strength building exercises, but very flowing movements to work the body as a whole unit. And so I started diving into it and realized that, hey man, like I can transform my physique, I can transform my mind, and it was just kind of this holistic approach towards training, body training, mind training, and it's just started to stem from there. And about 3 years ago is when I started the site. And my intention, honestly, wasn't even to start a site. I just created these different YouTube videos with different types of body weight training, doing like the Hindu push-ups and just putting like X push-ups and just putting my body in different angles and doing exercises. And people started loving them. Like, they just started taking off. I'm like, okay, is there an opportunity here? Like, I mean, obviously the message is getting out there and people are interested. So I built a site around this specific training protocol, and it has just taken off quite a bit. And that's kind of my philosophy towards training, and specifically using one's body, but going outside of the normal body weight exercises. It's not just about push-ups and pull-ups and chin-ups and squats. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of different ways that you can position your body and move your body, and not just a lateral plane, but in like this holistic plane, to work synergistic muscles and all different types of muscles. And that's kind of my approach towards fitness, and why I initially started the site A Shot of Adrenaline.
Cool, man. That's a very fascinating background, and just like real quick, I'd like to kind of delve in a little bit deeper of what your experience with the Eastern martial arts. I mean, what was that? What is that all about? As far as, because I know a lot of the Eastern martial arts, they go much deeper than learning just how to defend yourself or how to strike. There's much more of like a deeper place in there, and so I mean, what did that kind of teach you?
Yeah, it was. There are several layers deeper. I mean, the first layer, when you're learning anything, are the postures or the techniques. And in Tai Chi specifically, that's where I spent most of my time. You would spend a lot of time focusing on one one posture. Like there's a posture called hold the ball, and you're sitting in kind of a bow stance where your legs are shoulder width apart. You've got a neutral spine. Your arms are in front of you as if you're holding a ball, but you're focusing on relaxation first, because we don't realize how much tension we carry in our own body throughout the day. We just go about whatever we're working on, and then our body takes the toll, and then over time, of course, we end up in a nursing home and sitting in a wheelchair because we're not taking care of ourselves. So the first level is being able to relax one's body, focusing on which muscle groups and just releasing that tension. And then as you dive deeper, you focus on controlling internal energy. And a lot of people are confused about this and think, oh, this is some type of mysterious, hokey-pokey, Eastern, just philosophy that doesn't mean anything. But when you look at, and I've got background in the medical field as well, when you look at the meridians and the meridian pathways that the Chinese or Eastern medicine believe and focus on, and you parallel that with the central and peripheral nervous system that the Western science has proven, there are too many correlations between those two systems. It's not perfect, but there's too many correlations between looking at the central nervous system and how the nerves innervate into different organs and go out into the peripheral nervous system, and this nerve controls the kidneys, and this these nerves go into the adrenal glands. There's too much parallel between that and Eastern science, and so Tai Chi focuses on how do I control that internal energy, and once you can learn to control it for in these postures, then you can learn to control it for fighting. And that's why they say more westernized martial arts you can learn self-defense faster, but the Eastern, it takes longer, but long term it's more effective. I remember specific times where after I'd been practicing Tai Chi for 3 or 4 years, and I would have someone, this wasn't like like a street self-defense situation, but it was someone attacking me and catching me off guard. And before I even knew it, I had them in some type of wrist lock, and I had them on the ground. I thought, like, how did that happen? Like, how the heck did that happen? And my body just knew, like, I practiced it, and I worked on the visualization, I worked on it slowly, and then my body started learning and learns the energy. So an energy would come into me, and I would just neutralize it and then get them in a hold. And of course I wouldn't break anything. It was just a way to control the situation, and my body learned how to actually perform that movement and neutralize that energy. And so obviously you continue to go down deeper and deeper levels into more of the metaphysical and more the mental and spiritual components. But but that's where I think a lot of people miss the mark when they're just focusing on, like, how do I get bigger biceps? And that's a fine place to start. Like, even from my front page of my website, like how to build muscle without weights, without just body weight exercises. That's where people start usually. But then once they dive deeper, like a shot of adrenaline is about deeper level issues. Like, how do I achieve more than just a physique, more than just a great physique? Like, do I have a dream that I'm looking to achieve in my life? Do I have a vision for my life? And I think a lot of people don't have this vision for their life, and it stems from, it's kind of my goal with the website. It's like you start off on a superficial level, and then you start diving into these deeper and deeper levels, and I think great things can happen.
Yeah, wow. That was fascinating. It was cool to see. I mean, I think a lot of people, when we see these sort of Eastern martial arts and Tai Chi, and we see people in the park doing these kind of fluid movements, but a lot of it seems very passive, and so to the Western eye, we're like, what are they doing? Why are they doing that? Like, that seems like we don't get it. We don't get it. But just the simple practice of literally relaxing your body and getting into a deep state of relaxation, and letting go of all that tension that we hold. I mean, the benefits of that must be massive, because you look at anyone and they're holding tension somewhere. Because most people, we haven't learned how to be in a state of just relaxation or peace, and so everything that kind of upsets us, we store it. we just hold on to it, and maybe your shoulders are a bit tense, and you realize, wow, I'm holding my shoulders too high, and then you let that go. And so I guess training, or just jumping right into like combative elements right away is not the most effective way to go, or even just training to build muscle right away may not be the most effective way to go. Being able to just let go of that stress sounds like the most important fundamental step in order to be the most receptive to different styles of training or different goals. I mean, is that kind of the right idea?
Yeah, and there's different paths, of course. Like, say someone has a personality where they want to jump into just intense, Olympic lifting, and a lot of times if their personality is a little bit more type A, and then now they're just going balls to the wall and just lifting as much heavy weight as they can, and increasing the the adrenaline in their body, and like that starts to carry over into their daily life. So say their spouse or their girlfriend is just has a moment of where they do something wrong, and all of a sudden this rage comes out. It's like the Chinese philosophy or Eastern philosophy is the balance between yin and yang, and I think we forget that in our training.
We're all yang today.
Yeah, exactly. There's this, we're all yang. Yeah, exactly. It's just this intense go, as fast as you can, learn as fast as you can, move as fast as you can. You look at how we were for centuries and centuries, and the goal wasn't to necessarily learn it as fast as we could. The goal was to learn it as best that we could. You take the specific example of having someone work under someone to learn a skill or a craft. Like the goal necessarily wasn't to, learn from 50 different instructors so that you could innovate and move faster and climb to the top of the hill. It was to learn the craft under someone, and there was trust involved, and that's why there's a perspective of Eastern martial arts where you train under someone and trust them. And learn from them, and sometimes you'll even live with them and understand that there's more to the art than just the techniques. I think I'm a big fan of the UFC, and I've watched it from the very get-go, and I've watched it kind of evolve, and there's a natural progression that has happened, and it was Royce Gracie, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu versus Kempo Karate versus Sumo and whatnot. It was head against head, and of course, who ended up winning? It was jiu-jitsu. It was the ground guys. But then, over the long haul, it was the guys that could do everything. They were the most conditioned, and they could do these different things. So I know there's a place for that, but there's also a component of actually moving slower. Like you were talking about relaxing your body. Another component of Tai Chi is relaxing the breath. And there's a lot of people that say, "Oh, breathe through your lower belly like a baby," and that's true. Like the diaphragm pulls in more oxygen, and your blood becomes more oxygenated, and you could perform better, or in endurance sports or whatever you wanted to do. However, I'll put a caveat on, and that most people, I believe, have never felt true relaxed breathing, except for when they were a baby. Like when you practice Tai Chi for a long period of time, and you stand in one stance for 30 minutes, an hour, every day for years, you learn, and focusing just on your breath, and focusing on breathing as deep as you can, you get to this point where you breathe so deeply that your breath is going on its own, and it's like joy, like just breathing. There's like this simplicity where we try to breathe as deep as we can, and then we forget about it 2 seconds later. But when we practice it for a long period of time, we dive deeper into what does it mean to breathe through your lower belly. Like, yeah, we watch a baby do it, and then we can forcefully do it now. Once we dive deeper into that, there's just this intense, wow, like there's so many layers deeper when we sit in one practice. And that's why I love bodyweight training so much, is because when you practice that one style and you dive deeper into the elements, I think you experience more of what that has to teach you. You can cross-train, and there's obviously benefits to doing these different styles, but there's also a benefit in going into depth. And because of that depth, then you learn more about that specific training mechanism.
Wow. Yeah. It seems like in this day and age, it's there's this breaking in where more and more people are starting to realize that, whoa, yeah, we need that more yin energy. I mean, yoga has exploded in the last decade or more, and people are starting to do meditation and because at first glance it seems like you're wasting time. You could be doing so much right now, but like the benefits that it has is amazing because we do need that period just to kind of relax and recover and regroup if we're going to be effective.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there are different components. I remember two instances I'll probably never forget my entire life. It was when I was practicing Tai Chi. And I'm sure you've seen people do Tai Chi before. The very slow movements. And my sensei or master or my teacher challenged me one time, and he challenged me in two areas. One was to do the form. We had a form that we learned, and typically it would take 20 minutes, 23 minutes to get through the form. He challenged me to do the form, but do it so slowly that if someone were to look at you, they wouldn't be able to see that you were moving, but yet you were still moving. So that was one area. And then the other area where he challenged me is he challenged me to do the form backwards. So you do the form and you have a certain way of doing whatnot, and he said, do it exactly backwards. Like start with the ending movements and move backwards. And so I practiced these and I did those. And the first time I did the slow moving one, it was so crazy. This is when I was younger and I was living at home, and I did it for like an hour, hour and a half. And I was moving so slow. Like no one could see me move. And then I stopped doing it, and I went upstairs. I remember I was practicing in my basement, and I went upstairs to get something to eat. My mom was in the kitchen, and she started to talk to me, and it was a surreal experience because it almost felt like I could see the words as they traveled through the air towards my ears. Mm-hmm. It was this incredible experience where things were moving slowly, like super slowly. Like I could see things move, and my brain would understand what was going on in a slower fashion. And so, like I think there's this element where yeah, we move at such a fast pace, but we probably achieve less. And if we were to slow down and like dive deeper into whatever we're doing and spend more time thinking, then we could potentially achieve more. And then the other instance, when he challenged me to do it backwards, and I did it backwards, same thing happened, except for I went upstairs and she started talking to me, and it was like she was talking in reverse. Mm-hmm. Like our brains, that's kind of actually, I used to be the spinal cord and closed head injury program director for a home care agency. So I worked with patients that have had closed head injuries. And the brain is such a fascinating component where it's like, there are things that we can do with the brain that I don't think that we've come close to. And I think there's research that have proven that we're not using just 10%. We're using more than just 10%. But I still think that we're just on that tip of the iceberg to achieving what we truly can achieve in this world. Our minds and thoughts are constantly barraging us with, oh, you can't. Oh, Greg, you can't do this. You're not going to achieve this. Or Todd, you can't do this. And if we were to take captive those thoughts and control those thoughts, like we could achieve amazing things. When I first started off in Tai Chi, that's what happened. Like I learned to control these thoughts and focus my energy in one direction. And once I could do that, man, like as soon as I applied that to something else, it was just like this force to be reckoned with.
Right. So you're almost like detaching yourself from these unproductive or self-sabotaging thought forms or beliefs.
For sure. I think we're constantly, we have these constant, I mean, whether we watch TV or not, or whatever media, when we hang around people, and most people are negative, and this comes into us, and we start to believe it, even if we don't consciously do it, like we're unconsciously doing it. And even kind of the best people that are very focused on how am I thinking, and they still do it. So like, you really have to be conscious of like what are the thoughts in my head, because your thoughts are going to control your actions, and obviously your actions control your destiny or where you're headed. So like it starts And that's what internal martial arts or Eastern martial arts gave me. It gave me this perspective that I needed to start with the deeper levels. Like, why? Like, what's going on internally, and then move from there. Not just, oh, I see someone online with a great physique, and then, oh, I want to do what they're doing. And then you do what they're doing for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then, oh, you're not seeing results right away. So then what happens? You search on Google for the next person, and you're like, oh, wow, they have a great physique. It's like the shiny object syndrome. It's like, okay, move bouncing from one to the next, and you really never achieve anything. Like, you got to start with this core of, like, okay, who am I? Like, why am I doing this? And then, darn it, like, stick through it. Like, I deal with many people every day that they're like, I was doing this, and, oh, I saw your workout program, and now I want to do that. And I'm like, frequently I'll tell people, like, don't. Like, stop. Like, stick with one thing and give it a chance. Like, that's especially when you get into like bodyweight strength and looking to do more advanced moves like handstands and front levers and muscle ups and whatnot. It takes time. Like, you're not going to learn it in a day, or even a month. Like, it takes time. It takes time for that central nervous system and peripheral nervous system and your brain to just learn the movement, the pattern, and then that you move from one step to the next, to the next, to the next, and it takes years to get really good at these higher level calisthenics moves. And I think that the majority of people can benefit when they start off slowly, like start off very, very slow, like micro steps is kind of what I believe.
Right. Okay, so before we kind of flesh out some more training, what are some actionable things that someone listening that wants to reach a more relaxed, deeper state, what would you suggest they do if maybe they don't have an hour to go through a Tai Chi routine, but like what's a good starting place for someone to kind of get more yin into their life, so to speak?
Well, breathe. Everyone breathes, obviously, and most people that have practiced internal martial arts will start here, and there's a reason for it. Because say you're doing a typical bodybuilding routine, and you go to the gym and you just start off straight into, say you start off with a bench press or something, and like you just jump into it, and then even if you start off with lower weight, maybe you do, maybe you don't, doesn't really matter as much as pertaining to this question. Starting off with just doing some breathing, and you can still do dynamic movements, because the research shows and my experiences, before you start up the specific training, hour session or half an hour session, whatever it may be, you want to do dynamic movements. You don't want to just sit in a static stretch and focus on breathing, but yet you can still focus on breath while you're doing dynamic movements. So if your question is related to learning this element of being relaxed right before a training session, I would recommend focusing on breath with dynamic movements. And dynamic movements meaning, it can be related to your exercise. It could be, fast-paced walking. It could be a lot of different things. If the question is more related to how can I gain more relaxation and thereby peace in my daily life, then it needs to be this daily ritual that you get into. Maybe it's starting off right in the morning, and the first thing that you do is just sitting. You don't need to sit on the ground. You could sit in your chair. You could sit in a squat. Like, I'm a big proponent of just sitting in a squat and just focusing on your breath and just breathing for 5 minutes. Just focusing on your breath. And immediately what will happen to anyone that's a beginner is you'll notice the 1,001 thoughts that start popping in your head. Like, oh, I got to do this, and I got to do that, and you got to do that. And that's fine. Like, don't worry about, oh, I screwed up because I wasn't focusing on my breath. As soon as you notice it, you bring your mind back to your breath. And then at some point, probably sooner rather than later, your mind will trail off. And you just focus on that. For 5 minutes before the day begins, just do that. And over time, you'll start to become more centered and more relaxed and gain more peace in your life. That's how I'd kind of recommend doing that.
Yeah, I actually did that. I actually, I think year and a half ago, I started to really focus on becoming more present and aware and centered, and I like that's exactly my experience. Is thoughts would come up, but then you bring yourself back, and then like and maybe at first you can only maintain that state of non-thinking for a few seconds, and then eventually it would be longer. And it was almost like you're balancing on like a balancing beam, and then you step off to one side and you're thinking, and then you come back on, you step off to the other side, and eventually you can balance it, and you just realize how present you are. And for like 10, 15 plus minutes will go by, and you're like, whoa, I didn't have a single thought on my mind. And that sounds so crazy to most people. Wait, how did you not have a thought in your mind for 15 minutes? And it is just it is so powerful.
Right, and it's a beautiful thing too. Like when you're able to balance that component, where you're just not, your mind isn't racing like a beast, and you can just sit in this real. It's like a natural relaxation, mental relaxation that we should sit in, probably more frequently than we do. Right, we should probably be in this position, like when we're not doing this intense. If we're writing a book or something, yeah, obviously you have to have your mind working, but when we pull back and we relax for a little bit, man, like why does your brain need to move that fast? It doesn't. And that consistent practice, that's one thing that I used to, I got to the point where I was teaching regularly Tai Chi as well as Kempo, and that's one thing that I would just every time I taught, I would just instill that important mentality into my students, and that when you focus on the principles of Tai Chi being energy control, relaxation, breath, fluidity, these different components. There are 10 to 12 different. When you practice them in your session, they will bleed over into your daily life. They absolutely will. Like if you practice them, you focus on relaxation for a period of time, you will become more relaxed in your daily life. You will become more relaxed in your conversations. If you have a stressful job interview that's coming up, or whatever it may be, you will be more relaxed. And that just the principles, once you focus on a principle, it carries over into your daily life. And the vice versa of that is also true, the other side of the coin. If you're training just like, listening to Megadeth and swearing all over at people, and then punching the wall in between sets, like that will carry into your daily life too. Like what the actions, the habits that we form will carry us through our daily life. So we got to be very conscious of how we're maneuvering in these bodies, right? Like it's like every single moment matters because it will affect the next moment. That's what I believe. Right
on, man. Well, let's talk a little bit about training. And so, I mean, what is really your approach to working out? As far as a shot of adrenaline, you're big into bodyweight movements, and so how do you usually set up your workouts?
That's a good question. There's a lot of variety into it. So there's within the world of bodyweight training, there are tons of different components to it, and I like to explore a lot of the different facets of bodyweight training. I just came back from a Ido Portal seminar. I don't know if you know Ido.
No.
Okay, he's pretty big in the calisthenics space, and he focuses on movement based. So not just being like one faceted, but movement and mobilization, and just it's like the whole world of movement. And so after the seminar, which was maybe about a month ago or so ago, it really helped me transform my mentality, where it's not just about one facet, like one facet of bodyweight training. And so I've been transitioning more into kind of gymnastics moves, and more handstands and muscle ups and handstand push-ups, that type of thing. And so my training has looked more of longer periods of time, sometimes 2.5, 3 hours, but I'm focusing on longer rest periods, like 2 to 3 minute rest periods, and shorter, like a decrease in reps. Like if I'm doing handstand push-ups, I'll do 3 to 5 reps, and I'm just focusing on form and having my form. But I used to focus more on kind of more muscle building with bodyweight exercises, and then I was diving into more of the world of switching up my body weight distribution. So I'd be doing pull-ups, but I wouldn't have my weight 50-50. I'd focus on okay, how much weight can I bring in one side of my body on the concentric, the upward movement, and then really slowing down that eccentric while keeping 80 to 90% of my body weight in that arm, and then continuing on and trying to do a good 8 to 12, like a typical hypertrophy range. So I go through these different phases, and I think that's important. Like, for example, I was at a retreat on Saturday with a bunch of guys, and we played football for like a good hour, like hour and a half. And afterwards, I'm like, dang, like I'm sore. Like this is like, it's like if you don't train in a certain way, like your body will adapt to whatever you're training to. So I think it's important to have that mixture of have that variety. Yes, it's important to dive deep into one component, but you can add these different elements into it as well. So I've been focusing lately more on strength, more on balance, more on flexibility. But I used to kind of, when I first started A Shot of Adrenaline, I was working on like building muscle, like how do you build muscle with body weight exercises. And then as my interest started to change, I became more interested in strength and balance and kind of this, in quotes, self-dominance. Like how do I move my body in ways that I was never able to move my body weight before. And I think that it's this world that you can explore that I can't move my body in this way. It's like if you're doing a kneeling back bend, you're on your knees, and can you go all the way back and put your head on the floor with your arms above your head? Like, can you or can you not? And if it's not your goal, then that's fine. Mm-hmm. But if it is your goal to kind of master your body, well, hey, there's some place that you can start to work on. That includes flexibility and your hip flexors and in your quads, and you got to have strength in your back and your core, of course. But it's finding different ways that your body can maneuver. Like for another example, are wall walks. Like your back is against a wall, and you just take maybe a foot out from the wall, and then you start bending over backwards, and you walk down the wall with keeping your feet in place. Well, that's not only just including strength, that's including tremendous flexibility in the spine. So there's this kind of this overall multifaceted approach that I'm diving more into now, as opposed to just specifically strength training. How do I get as strong as I can with bodyweight training, or how do I get as big as I can with bodyweight training? I'm realizing that there's a world that's far greater than just those two components.
Okay, right. Well, let's talk about a couple things. One is, how do you utilize bodyweight training in order to build muscle? And another part is, what other bodyweight tools do you like to utilize to keep your body balanced, flexible, and just keep your body almost like injury-proofed and functional?
Right.
Let's start with, for the purposes of building muscle, because a lot of people believe that they can't build that much muscle with bodyweight training. So let's start there.
Right. And I remember this same question. I was chatting with this was a little while ago, Lee Labrada, who was the former Mr. Universe, and I was actually interviewing him. I said, how do you use bodyweight training? And you know what he said? He said that I always include it as the finisher. He's like, if I'm doing lat pull downs or whatever for the lats, I'll do some pull-ups afterwards. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's like the traditional viewpoint. Like, you can use some body weight as the finisher to kind of close the gap, so to speak. And as I started diving more into bodyweight training and getting questions from people, I almost always start with nutrition, because I usually have some guy that's really skinny. Like, I just want to do bodyweight training, but I want to get big. I'm like, okay, like, honestly, you're not gonna, like, if you just do bodyweight training. Like, you always have to start with solid nutrition. And I'm mostly paleo, but I'm a big proponent of nutritional timing, and using your nutrients, the macronutrients, for optimal workouts and optimal recovery and whatnot. But that's where I usually have people start. It's like get on a solid nutrition plan, and then from there, like, start experimenting. And in terms of specific techniques, there are quite a few of them with using just body weight. I mentioned one of them is body weight distribution. Whenever you're trying to build muscle, you want to reach that fatigue within kind of an 8 to 12 rep range. If you're in the lower range, you're going to be building more strength. If you're in the higher range, it's going to be starting to work on more endurance, increasing the diameter of the capillaries, and your body's just getting adjusted for doing the movement over and over again, which is going to be more endurance. So you want to find that range of that 8 to 12 rep range. If you can do 15 pull-ups in a row, well, that's a problem. If you're trying to build muscle, like, you're not going to be building muscle. So then you want to start to play around with the body weight distribution. Okay, so can I shift my weight over to one side? Can I increase that time under tension? Can I focus more on the muscle? And while I'm doing the movement, I'm getting more of a contraction. So visually and intentionally, I'm contracting the muscle more. The eccentric, focusing on the eccentric portion is another component. Like, while I'm up in that, if I'm shifted over to one side and I'm up on that pull-up, it's just going down slowly. So you're increasing the time under tension, but also focusing on the eccentric contraction. So you're tearing that muscle tissue faster. So there's these different techniques that I teach for people that want to build muscle. Now, I'm not the guy that says bodyweight training is the best way to build muscle. I'm not that guy. Like, if you want to build muscle fastest, you want to incorporate weights in your training. Like, there's just no ifs, ands, or buts. I mean, yeah, you look at, the argument is typically, you look at gymnastics and gymnasts, and they're only using bodyweight training and they're ripped. Like, okay, yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. But take the other side of the coin. Who are the biggest dudes? The biggest dudes are entering into bodybuilding competitions, and they're focusing on these same principles that I teach in bodyweight training for muscle growth, but they're doing it with weights. So there's an element of how fast do you want to go in achieving whatever goal that you want to achieve. And I like I said before, I love diving deep into bodyweight training. So my goal isn't to get like absolutely as huge as I can. Like, my goal is to have a really nice physique, of course, but it's also to have this larger viewpoint of what it means to be healthy. And so you mentioned, kind of in a sense bulletproofing. Like, what do you do? And that's, what do you do to prevent injuries and that type of thing. And there are a couple different components, but one is mobility work, and not just, by a lot of people think mobility is flexibility, and mobility is not flexibility. Flexibility is being able to, do the side splits. It's more passive. You mentioned passive before. Mobility is strength under flexibility. So you take like and I don't know how familiar you or your audience is with certain gymnastics moves, but you take like a front lever. A front lever is you're off, you can do it off a bar, you can do it off of rings, and your body is parallel to the ground, and you're just hanging from just using your arms. So there's this, and then what you do is you can transition. You can swing your legs up, and you can kind of switch into what's called a German hang, where you're completely rotated around, and you do it slowly. So there's this strength. There's this scapula strength. The rhomboids and the teres major and minor, and these different stabilization muscles are strong, but they're in a stretched state. So how much strength can you have under movement, and while those muscles are being stretched? And that's what mobility really is. And there are different ways of training it. Typically, it's using some weight. It doesn't need to be a heavy weight. There's one of my favorites is for shoulders, and it's called shoulder dislocates. And you just take a bar out in front of you, and you just bring it all the way behind you and all the way back as far as you can. And so there's a little bit of weight, a little bit of tension, but the shoulder muscles and internal external rotators are getting some work, and you're building that strength under duress. So that's kind of one of the ways that you can decrease the chances of injury. And then the other way, which I am super passionate about, is isometrics. Like, I'm a big proponent of building strength without even moving. So there's different types of isometrics, and We can go into that if you want, but it's a way to essentially bulletproof, not fully, but more so than if you weren't to do isometric strength exercises.
Right. So what are some examples of the isometric movements that you really find effective?
Yeah, well, definitely. There's static contraction. I mean, that's like what most people probably know as isometrics. You're sitting in a like a wall sit doing isometrics, or you're doing a plank. That's a type of isometrics. But there's also yielding isometrics, and the easiest example is for your pecs. Like, say you're to put your hands in a prayer position, and what you're doing is it's called yielding, and you push your hands as tight as you can together. And what that's doing is that's contracting more muscle fibers. So that's a type of isometrics. And then there's the third type is overcoming, and that an example of that is you stand against a wall, you put your hands on the wall, and then you push absolutely as hard as you can. So you're engaging all those muscle groups that you need to pushing against the wall, and that's called overcoming isometrics. And there are different ways. I've got a full program on how to use isometrics to build strength, but there are lots of different ways that you can use it to, like just decrease the chance of injury. Not only that, but then recover from an injury faster. Like, at some point, if you're training hard, you're going to get injured. I mean, it's just kind of part of the game. You're pushing your body, and at some point, you're going to step over that line. And it's hard to train, especially with like a strain or a sprain. Maybe it's more of like a ligament issue or a tendon issue. It's hard to do something movement based, and obviously doing some type of movement is important for healing, but you can also focus on building strength even when you're injured by using isometrics. You can do the overcoming or static contraction, or the yielding, to give your muscles this training of strength, but yet at the same time you're not causing a deeper level of damage by moving that joint.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I never thought of using isometrics as a tool when you're injured. It makes a lot of sense. And I mean, if you're working through an injury and you can't bench press, for example, maybe you can't even do dips or push-ups, then yeah, doing a press, an isometric press against the wall, or with squeezing your hands together, would be a great way to maintain strength and limit any muscle loss.
For sure, and great for traveling too. I mean, anytime you're traveling and you're like, oh man, like I can't get a workout in, man, you can do workouts at any time. Like, I'm a big believer in adjusting your training mechanism or training protocol to fit your lifestyle, whatever lifestyle that you want to have.
Yeah, very interesting. I remember hearing a story about how isometrics first came about, and I believe it was like some prisoner of war was locked up, and he just started pulling against these bars, and he did this for a few months, and eventually he developed the strength in order to pull these bars apart and sneak out, and he escaped. I forget his name. I read about this in an old strength training book.
Yeah, I actually wrote an article, and gosh, I forget his name. I think it was maybe a Russian. I think it was a Russian concentration camp, and he did it 3 times. He actually did it 3 times. He actually, it took a while before he built up that strength, and he would bend them to the point where he could slip through, and then they caught him, and then they put him back, probably in a different cell, and then he would do the same thing, and then I think it was on the 3rd time where he actually escaped. But yeah, there's these intense, these crazy stories of these people. Then they're just bending bars and whatnot, and gosh, the capacity of the human body is absolutely amazing. Like I still remember reading a Jackie Chan book, and I think it was his autobiography, and he's talking about being trained as an acrobat when he's like 3 years old and whatnot, and he shares this really funny story where I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years into his training, and he and some of his friends snuck out during the night. And it was kind of an earlier night, and they snuck out and they went into the marketplace, and they stole some bread from this baker. and the baker started running after them, and they jumped onto this two-story bus, and the baker jumped onto the bus as well, and he's running after them. All these kids, these young acrobats, they go running up the stairs, and then the baker's running up the stairs after them. And what do they do next? They jumped right off a moving two-story bus, went right into a roll, and then kept running. And the baker's up here on top of the two-story bus thinking, all right, like, how am I gonna get these guys now? And it's just a testimony to like what our bodies can achieve, and whether it be strength with isometrics, or it be being able to do crazy parkour moves, or crazy moves on a bar, or if your goal is to deadlift 500-600 pounds, like whatever your goal is, like there's so much that your body can do that is just absolutely amazing. I think people miss the mark, not when they don't set a goal and try to achieve it. It's when they're not clear on their goal, and they start bouncing into one thing and the next thing and the next thing, and before they know it, they're frustrated. They don't look the way they want to look, and then that starts defeating them in other areas of their life. I think it's so important to have a vision, like what is my goal, and then just absolutely just see that vision for your life and start working towards it.
Right on, dude. Yeah, very cool. Well, here we're just about out of time, so I guess we'll wrap up now. It's been a blast having you on, and for people that want to, delve into your approach to training, they should go over to ashotofadrenaline.com. And do you have a course or anything you sell over there, or programs to help people build that bodyweight strength?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the site is .net, ashotofadrenaline.net.
Adrenaline.net, my bad, yeah.
Yep, that's fine. And then, I've got several. I've got a bodyweight overload, which is kind of a muscle building using bodyweight exercise. It's pretty intense. Like it's based off of a traditional bodybuilding routine. That's pretty intense. You're going to be building hypertrophy and muscle size. And then I've got an isometric strength that's totally based off of isometrics, a little bit less intense than the bodyweight overload program. And then I've got a bodyweight 9, which is focused on dropping body fat. Like, how do I do intense bodyweight exercises just for just a short period of time, and then drop body fat. So I lay out the nutrition, I lay out exactly what you need to eat, as well as I do follow-along workouts, so you can kind of follow me through these workouts throughout the training plan.
All right, very cool. So you guys can head over to ashotofadrenaline.net, and we'll have all the information in the show notes. Thanks again for coming on, Todd. We'll talk soon.
Cool. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, take care.